Yeah, no, you go right ahead. Have a seat. Make sure that your make sure that your speakers are working.
So quiet.
I know.
Yeah. Somebody talk. It's less nerve wracking if you talk. Yeah.
I know.
There you go.
We should have music like
Have
we
a
do at
sing
a
along.
football game.
Break the ice.
That'd be good. We are live from Iowa Central Community College. This is the District 5 County Board of Supervisors Public Forum. Tonight's forum is sponsored by the Greater Fort Dodge Growth Alliance. We'd like to thank Iowa Central for the use of this wonderful facility out here this evening, and I thank all you folks for coming out this evening and those that have tuned in to KVFD. Tonight we will have two people that are vying for this position, Nick Carlson and Jim Reed. Earlier, we flipped a quarter to see who would start off this evening first. Jim Reed decided he'd like to open up, so he will start off. We're going to give them 4 minutes each to be able to kind of tell you a little bit about their background. Following that, we'll have 2 minutes for each one to answer the questions. Your questions can be picked up by, we have two people that are picking them up. We have Matt and Jim. So anytime you have your cards, simply just raise them up in the air. They'll come by, they'll pick them up. They'll then be brought over to our sifting table to make sure that we have appropriate questions coming up here. And with that, I think we'll get started. Jim?
Thank you much. Thanks to everybody who came out tonight. Actually, nice turnout. I've actually been through this process once before, and I think we might have had 15 people at the first one I participated in, so thank you for coming. Thank you to Jill Nelson for helping orchestrate this, to Bennett O'Connor for serving as moderator, to the Growth Alliance, and also to Nick for finding a mutually agreeable date that worked for both of us. I'd like to acknowledge some friendly faces in the audience tonight. I have with me Pam Passo, my significant other of 15 years. Pam's a Claire Bear, as she likes to say, from Claire, Iowa, graduate of Northwest Webster. And my mom and dad, Dr. James and Ruth Reed, are in the audience also. Dad was a longstanding OB-GYN here in town, having delivered about 4,400 kids. And if I learned anything about sweat equity and work ethic, it's when he went out once a week at 4 in the morning to deliver a baby that I learned that. And Mom, Ruth Reed, is one of the ringleaders of that group, Operation Christmas. Don't get in the way of those gray-haired gals, because I tell you what, they'll run you over. I don't care, but they do some great work. And I learned my community service, background probably from my mom. A little bit of background about myself. I'm a graduate of Fort Dodge Senior High, proud to be a Dodger, but go Gales too. I'm running for office, obviously. Went to Iowa State University and got a degree in psychology in 1984. All good doctor sons put pressure on themselves to go to med school, but my whopping 2.85 grade point average wasn't enough to get me there inherently, so I went to the University of Iowa thinking maybe I'd be able to get my GPA up, and got a second degree in biology. And ultimately, my rent was due. And my dad, by the way, did not put any pressure on me. He always used to use the phrase, "All I want, kid, is for you to have gainful employment." And at the time, I didn't really fully understand what that was. But rent was due, and obviously, I needed gainful employment at that time. So I had an offer to sell copiers for a salary of $14,000 a year. And I said, heck yes, I'll sell copiers. So my first job out of college was in outside sales, working the Iowa City, Johnson County, and Lynn County area down into Washington, Iowa. And after 4 years of doing that, I had the opportunity to come back to Fort Dodge. And I got to tell you, as a kid, when you're young, I think you tend to look at your community for what it lacks as opposed to what it has. And so, you know, when I was young, life was beyond the borders of Fort Dodge, but for 23 straight weeks in 1992 into 93, I drove back and forth to Fort Dodge, and something was calling me home. Best move I ever made, I became sales manager at a company called Fort Dodge Business Systems, a position of which I served for 22 years. We were acquired for $6 million as part of an acquisition of Mason City Business Systems in 2012, and ultimately I was a casualty of that acquisition, and now I'm selling copiers again. The defining thing for me coming back to Fort Dodge was I had the unique opportunity to become part of the Daybreak Rotary Club and serve as one of the visionaries behind founding Fort Dodge's Dragon Boat Festival. That in turn led us to do the laser light show, of which I produced out at Dodger Stadium in year 2000. That then became the springboard for me to serve as a leader and form the Olson Park Bandshell Project, of which I'm very proud. I helped spearhead raising $585,000 privately. Now I am the president and founder of Shellebration, and I'm proud to say it's not my individual efforts, but the thing I'm proud of is having built a team of 18 volunteer unpaid board members that stage an annual event that brings in 7,000 people a year. Why am I running? I love Fort Dodge, Webster County, and the surrounding area. I want people to love it like I do, and I want to continue to play a role in that. And I also think, given the state of national politics, it's critical that good people like Nick Carlson and myself step up. And I can honestly say that whether I'm elected or whether Nick is, I believe that we would make a good contributor to the supervisors with the existing board.
Thank you, Jim. Nick?
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Connor, Mr. Reed, and thank you to Iowa Central and the Greater Fort Dodge Growth Alliance for hosting this forum. This is my first public speech, so forgive me for being a little bit nervous. Well, obviously, my name is Nick Carlson. I was born and raised right here in Webster County. I graduated from St. Ed's in Iowa Central. I am a Fort Dodge firefighter paramedic, and I have volunteered as a Barnum firefighter. I also serve on the Webster County Conservation Board. Sarah, my future wife, who's also in the audience, and I will be raising our family here in Webster County. Living on the outskirts of town, I became more interested in where our tax dollars were going. Through that research, I became aware of our county supervisors. In the county, neighbors are farther apart, so there's a reliance on neighbors unlike anything I experienced growing up in Fort Dodge. I understand and am comfortable with both lifestyles. So I started attending the meetings and investigating what supervisors actually do. I gained the background and learned from their experience. As a result, I believe I have the ability to serve and represent the people of the 5th District in a responsible and dignified manner, and I hope that you'll vote for me on November 8th.
Thank you, Nick. We're going to start off with an easy question, I think. Nick, the first one would be for you. What would you hope to accomplish on the Webster County Board of Supervisors if elected?
Well, I would hope to accomplish working with our fellow cities and the Fort Dodge Growth Alliance and bringing more businesses to our area. That would be my biggest accomplishment, more housing in the smaller communities and more people to this area.
Thank you. Jim?
Ooh, where to start? I want Fort Dodge to be a place where past Fort Dodge residents that have left this area, that maybe left thinking Fort Dodge was less than desirable and Webster County was less than desirable, and graduates from the Southeast Websters or the South Central Calhoun and around the region, I want them to look at Fort Dodge and surrounding area in Webster County as a place that they would consider calling home. I think the biggest contribution that anybody can make to the supervisors is basically bringing expertise and past leadership. No one person can make a difference in government. It takes a team to do that. And admittedly, the team that is in place currently, I think has done an incredible job. And I guess I'd like to say, because we're vying for Clark Fletcher's seat, a couple of years ago I actually ended up running against Clark because Phil Condon had indicated he was going to vacate the seat, and redistricting actually pitted us together in a primary. My goal as a supervisor is to represent Webster County and try to be half the supervisor that Clark Fletcher was. He was a man of temperament. He's one of the last people to speak in the room. He listens. He gathers all the information, and I tell you what, he uses that business savvy, which I think I have is 22 years, having been sales manager at Fort Dodge Business Systems, but also having brokered and led community partnerships between the city of Fort Dodge, using facilities for celebration, being able to work with Webster County and the services that they provide when we're trying to get 7,000 people in and out of a celebration event. So my goal is to work cohesively with the existing supervisors, benefit from their existing expertise, but bring a vantage point that perhaps they don't currently have.
Thank you. If elected, how would you support job growth, economic development, and increased employment in Webster County? Jim?
You know, increased employment, everybody who's ever run for office, it's funny, before I ever got into a capacity to run for office, everybody I've ever, seen run for city council or supervisor or regionally always talks about bringing jobs. And it's interesting because there is no one person that can do that, although it seems like when there is growth in an area, people like to take credit for the successes that happened on their watch. I credit the past leaders of the county, City of Fort Dodge, and the Growth Alliance for having the foresight to bring the crossroads and, bring about the crossroads of global innovation, i.e., we all commonly refer to as the Ag Park. That was the single biggest piece of economic development, both now and in the future, that we could have ever had. So what would I do specifically? I think tax incremental finance is a powerful tool, but it has to be used judiciously. For people in the audience that don't fully understand what it represents, it's a form of public financing. You can either abate taxes after the fact, but the best bang for the buck, and I've probably been taught this by existing supervisors and guys like Dennis Plotz, is actually invest net new taxes back in that ag park. That is the single biggest economic opportunity that we have. The rail spur that's been talked about, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm an expert because I lack the experience that the Mark Campbells, the Merrill Lefflers, the Keith Denclaws have. But I think if you selectively look for opportunities to reinvest net new taxes derived from the new companies that come back in what's going on there, you're going to reap a benefit. So make clear, we're not talking about new taxes, we're talking about investing tax that comes from companies that come to our town.
Thank you, Jim. Nick, if elected, how would you support job growth, economic development, and increased employment in Webster County?
Well, economic development involves three things. That'd be job retention, job creation, and quality of life. The first thing we need to do is take care of the businesses that are in our community, which I think we've done a good job of taking care of. The next would be the job creation. So we need to get businesses into our communities. That entails a better quality of life, which is the third aspect of it. So our quality of life, we've been working on with trail systems, the water systems, just everything in the area that we have. So I think those three things would be what we need to work on for better economic development.
Thank you. Nick, minimum wage is $7.25. Johnson, Polk, and Lee counties are considering ordinances to increase it. Do you see it as the Webster County Board of Supervisors' role to change minimum wage? Why or why not?
Personally, I have not looked into how the Webster County supervisors could control that minimum wage or how it would be under our control. So no, at this time, I cannot answer that question with, that would be my job as a Webster County supervisor.
Okay. Jim?
I'm a fiscal conservative at heart. I spend my money pretty judiciously. I live, Pam Paso, my significant other, it probably forces me to be even more judicious than I would be, naturally. As far as minimum wage goes, years ago, tell you a little bit of Fort Dodge history, in the, Nestle Purina was threatened to basically divest by the Federal Trade Commission years ago, and Fort Dodge banded together to basically, save the plant. It was a great thing, and in the aftermath of that, there was considerable economic growth. As an example, in my management capacity, we were hiring secretarial for, just making copies for the public. It was a very basic job, and it wasn't real skilled. But at that time, to compete when minimum wage was $5.50, we couldn't find anybody to serve in that capacity for less than probably $7.50, $8. So what I would say to the minimum wage, the market should drive that. Because if you put an artificial minimum wage in and all of a sudden the bottom goes out of your economy, you have no mechanism to dial it back in. And I think it's a false positive, because what's going to happen is people who may have had a job now will be at risk of having their job cut. So I'm not against wages at all, anything but. But I do believe that the market will drive the wage, and I offer that as a past example when basically while we were a $5.50 minimum or $5.25 minimum, you were seeing wages at Burger King locally upwards of $8 an hour. Let the market drive the wage, in my opinion.
Thank you, Jim. Jim, should the legislative increase the levy cap to allow counties to adjust the individual county levies based on region's budget needs?
Repeat the question one more time, would you please?
Yep, tongue twister. Should the legislation increase the levy cap to allow counties to adjust the individual county levies based on region's budget needs?
So you're asking us essentially, and this is not our purview as elected officials, as supervisors, you're talking about the $8.1, you're talking about whether or not the state should do it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, for the record, for the people that are listening remotely and those that are in the audience, this would be one of those trapdoor questions for the people to respond to, because at the end of the day, while it has an impact on counties, you're talking about what the state should do that would influence us. What he's referring to is the maximum cap that the county can have, I believe, is $8.10. Yeah, is that I believe it is. It was the last time I researched it, which was a while ago. So am I in favor? The backdoor question here is, am I in favor of raising taxes? And the answer is no. The key to economic growth is increasing your tax base, folks. We can shake y'all down for a little bit more money, search for pennies in the seat cushions of your cars, but true growth is predicated on increasing economic development. You have an ag park. You have the opportunity to get additional tenants in that ag park. Last I saw, there was a considerable amount of turf out there, and I know that there's a lot of activity on the part of the Growth Alliance and the supervisors. So true growth is not asking for an increase in your debt cap. True growth is making those decisions locally. What you need is like supervisors, like the existing supervisors. They really do set a good precedent in terms of their demeanor, their zero debt load. The things that they've done have really put us in a positive position. So if I were to do anything that involved taxes, it would be derived from new companies, not born of the citizens of Webster County, but net new tax money through tax incremental finance and TIF is the way to do it, in my opinion. So the answer, that's a long-winded way of saying no. Don't increase taxes by asking the legislature to raise that levy cap.
Thank you. Nick, you want to hear that again, or do you
Yeah,
kind of understand
one more
that
time,
question?
please.
Okay. Should the legislation increase the levy cap to allow counties to adjust the individual county levies based on region's budget needs?
No, I would disagree with letting legislature control our taxes around here. I would also have to say that I would be more in favor of bringing businesses to the area, as I said before. That will give us a better tax base for Webster County. I think that's the way we should take care of that.
Thank you. Let's see. I believe that question, Jim, you started off with that one.
Correct.
So Nick, you both are employed full-time. What have you done to eliminate the learning curve you would have if elected, and what will your commitment be if elected?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yes, I can. Okay, both of you are employed full-time. What have you done to eliminate the learning curve? In other words, checked out, figured out what you need to do as a county board supervisor. And if elected, what will your commitment be if elected time-wise?
Okay. Well, I've already proven my commitment to attend Webster County Board of Supervisor meetings. I've been going since January. That was 3 months before I even turned in my paperwork for the primary. So since I've been there, I've been taking notes and asking questions. In addition, I've also sat through the budget process. I attended Iowa State Extension's 3-day drainage school, and I have been to a few of the drainage district meetings. So I think if I am elected and voted in, I will dedicate more of my time to this position.
Thank you. Jim? Repeat the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
What the heck?
Okay.
We'll fill some of the time allotment.
Yeah. Yes, sir. You're employed full-time.
Correct.
What have you done to eliminate the learning curve you would have if elected, and what will your commitment be if elected?
You know, I don't know that I've actually proactively, consciously done anything to decrease my learning curve. And what I mean by that is very simple. For those of you that have had the opportunity or been in a position of responsibility to hire people, 3 words: experience, experience, experience. Because, you know, we can in a short time, and don't get me wrong, because I think all the supervisors that are here would agree, there is no supervisor textbook. Every one of the ones that has talked to me and past supervisors, there is going to be a learning curve. My past experience, I actually, believe it or not, had a small drainage project that I oversaw. Celebration had pooling water underneath the stage where Leonard Skinner was going to perform, and I had to pull a rabbit out of my hat and make sure I didn't have to cancel the show. I had a compelling need, and so I worked with Rash Construction to basically do a drainage project. As far as my work that I do, I'm actually 54 years old. I have a level of comfort in terms of my economic security. I can honestly say I don't need the job. I want the job because I thrive on what's going on. So I keep my political finger in the wind. I press the flesh in almost every business in town. So I've got a pretty good idea, past, present, and hopefully future, what's going on. And when I signed my most recent contract with Advanced Systems, knowing that I was going to run, there was one thing I did in preparation for this. I stipulated as part of the negotiations a political office provision that basically gives me the latitude to go from a higher salary plus commission to a high salary or a high commission, low salary, so I can do the job, and basically if I sell something, I'll get paid what I'm worth. So I'm unencumbered employment-wise, and experience, experience, experience.
Thank you. Jim? County supervisors are drainage district trustees. Given the Des Moines Waterworks lawsuit and EPA's recent entry to control non-point runoff, how do you envision your task of trustee to change?
Well, whether it's mine or whether my opponent is fortuitous enough to be elected, it probably represents one of the scariest challenges for the current supervisors, but future supervisors. Number one, the court case between the lawsuit from Des Moines Waterworks initiated by Bill Stowe, it's out of the control of the present supervisors. If that adjudicates in favor of Des Moines Waterworks, it's going to have a ripple effect, not only in Iowa, but it's going to have a chilling effect on agricultural across the country. Anybody who lives in an upstream watershed ought to be scared as hell, frankly, if that thing rules in favor of them. To his point on the EPA, regardless of what happens in that case. So if that adjudicates, hopefully, you know, the courts will have common sense and throw that out the way it deserves to be and preserve agriculture. But the EPA is probably going to, if you go to the EPA's website and look at what's happening in the watershed, 41% of all runoff goes to the Mississippi River from 31 states, ends up in the Gulf of Mexico, and has created what's called the hypoxic zone. It's basically a dead zone. And clearly, if you read, this is going to filter backwards, and I think you're going to see more EPA regulations, and ultimately, that's going to fall on the supervisors to try to figure that out. So, you know, there's no magic bullet. It's probably one of those issues where it's better to try to proactively anticipate, get in front of it, much like deferred maintenance of a building, because I think those costs are eventually going to trickle down to the counties. So to the degree that you can try to figure out what is your 10-year plan, your 15-year plan, my hope is that whatever regulation comes from the EPA, it's phased in a way that doesn't bury counties and more specifically drainage districts financially because of having to institute whatever they rule too quickly.
Thank you, Jim. Nick, county supervisors are drainage district trustees. Given the Des Moines Water Works lawsuit and EPA's recent entry to control non-point runoff, how do you envision your task of trustee to change?
Okay, well, as trustees, we need to have a plan for the future of this. We need to be working with each of the farmers and definitely be more well-informed on what's going on. I think that'll be our biggest task, is just to work ahead of it.
Okay, thank you. Nick, this question seems to be coming up quite a bit this evening. Why did you decide to run?
Why did I decide to run? There's more reasons than I probably have time, but it started with living on the outskirts of town. I became more aware of where our tax dollars were going. Through that, I became interested in the works of our county supervisors. In the country, neighbors are farther apart, so there's a reliance on neighbors unlike anything I experienced growing up in Fort Dodge. I am comfortable with both lifestyles, but that's the reason I want to run for supervisor.
Thank you. Jim, why did you decide to run?
You know, the easiest way to say it is, with all that I've been involved in, whether it be, having the privilege of being one of the founders of Dragon Boating, the laser light show we produced at Dodger Stadium, I've become addicted to making a difference. I got to tell you, I like being in the fray. I want people to love the Fort Dodge region, Webster County, and all that we have to offer as much as I do. It pains me when I hear people make the phrase dirty Dodge, or it's like, oh, I'd never come back, to Gowrie. I don't like what's going on in that area. It pains me. And there's no magic bullet to make them think differently. It's a matter of chipping away at the rock. So I want to make a difference so people see this area in a more positive light. Repeat the question one more time, because I trailed off and I have one point that I want to make.
Why did you decide to run?
There's no easy way to say that you have confidence in your opinion and your decision-making capability without potentially risking people thinking that, you're too proud of your opinion. But you look at our national politics and what we have to choose from this go-around, and I don't care if you're an R or a D, it's like, dear God, can't we do better? And Nick Carlson, if I don't, I tell you what, if I don't get elected, I will be the first to offer any advice, any insight I can to this man, because he's the type of quality individual that would make a good supervisor. Likewise, I think I bring a skill set to the table. So the other thing is, I think I bring some leadership qualities to the table. I'd like to think I have the demeanor, the professionalism. We're not always going to agree, but what I like about the current Board of Supervisors, and actually past boards of supervisors, unlike what's happened at the city level in Fort Dodge, sometimes in the past, people disagree reasonably, and they do it to the betterment of the area. So I'm addicted to Fort Dodge, and I want to make a difference, and I think I can do the job and do it well.
Well, thank you. You kind of answered this next question, so go right ahead and
Sorry.
talk right about it again, but that's okay. Jim, members of the Board of Supervisors are on a number of boards in the county. What experience do you have in serving on such boards or directors?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I'll have the ability to do, as a past president, I am no longer part of Daybrook Rotary, but I was a past president and obviously served as the committee chair for Dragons on the Des Moines and also the Dragon Boat Bash. I can read a balance sheet, folks. I've served on many boards, Girl Scout Board, Fort Dodge Community School Foundation Board. I'm the president and founder of a 501c4 nonprofit organization. So when it comes to financial oversight, and I think the existing supervisors know, you do have to, you can't just armchair attend a meeting. You've got to have your finger on the pulse, and we've got local examples of how important that is. So, I know what an income statement looks like. I know how to, I guess, make sure that what's being projected to me, is not somebody blowing a little smoke, if you will. And so I think those past board experiences will serve me very, very well, regardless of which of the boards that I would be asked to serve on.
Thank you, Jim. Nick, members of the Board of Supervisors are on a number of boards in the county. What experience do you have in serving on such boards or directors?
Well, I'm currently on the Webster County Board of Conservation, hope to be on the supervisors. But that's the most current board I'm on. You know, we go through the statements and everything. As far as the budgets, I sat through the budget hearings this last February, and I've asked the current supervisors a lot of questions about budgets. So I think that's what's going to help me down the road next year for if I become a Webster County supervisor.
Okay, thank you. Nick, apparently the Iowa Counties Association is in support in increasing the 9/11 funding. Do you support such a increase in this funding?
I'm not exactly sure how much funding are they. I would be in support of the 9/11 funding. Being a firefighter, paramedic, our counties need all the funding we can get, so I would definitely be for the 9/11 funding.
Jim?
Repeat the question and give me clarity. Are you talking about the E11, the talk about doing the regional E911 emergency response?
You know, I am not familiar with the Iowa County Association is talking specifically about. The question is simply, do you support Iowa County Association to increase the 9/11 funding? And I've got to assume that's what it is.
Yeah, and for the audience, it's a very important distinction because 9/11 obviously is a tragic date in our American history. 911 is what you call for emergency calls. There's been discussion and talk about trying to regionalize E911, and I'm going to draw a parallel because I don't have all the information because I'm not party to that, but I'm knowledgeable of it because E911 is actually a copier customer of mine, and it's really like, I'm going to draw the parallel, and that is there had been talk years ago about trying to go to regional county seats. And I think you all know how much backlash that met. Do you put it in Calhoun? Do you put it in Webster? You know, and obviously all the counties defend their own. So two things to that end. I'd want to know more about the specific plan as far as how that would work, because at the core, the fiscal conservative in me would be, you know, I guess supportive of it if we could guarantee that there wouldn't be a reduction in service, not only in our local communities, but across the regions, because my understanding this would actually go, you know, Pocahontas, Webster County, Calhoun. It would be more of a regional effect. So if we could guarantee that it didn't negatively impact our ability to make a 911 call and expect a response, and also, what would it do budgetarily? Because I don't yet know how it's going to impact the individual budgets. So where I was going in terms of being a fiscal conservative, you basically consolidate to try to find savings, but if you do that at the expense of public safety, I don't know that it'd be for it. So I think no matter who gets in there, you're really going to have to answer those questions to make an informed business decision.
Thank you. Jim, tonight we have Supervisor Leffler, Dinklaw, and Campbell in the audience. And the question is, where can the supervisors save the county money?
Where can the supervisors save the county money? Let's ask a couple of people that haven't been elected to the office to assume they know more than the current Board of Supervisors. Not going to go there. What I would say, generally speaking, is you've got to have, you know, your past tendencies reflect what your future tendencies will be. I've already declared that I'm a fiscal conservative at heart. I don't want to spend your money for you, but at the same time, you know, one of the questions that could come up, probably should come up in lean economic times is I'm a salesman at heart. I'm never going to make a decision and supplant the collective will of you, the voters. But what I am going to do is I am inherently and innately programmed to sell. If I think that there's something that you need to know, would want to know, and I'm passionate about it, I'm going to try to make a case to the public for that. I'm going to communicate that. I'm going to make sure that we've gotten it out there adequately. That's one thing that sometimes in government we don't adequately do, is convey a message, use the media to our advantage to make sure that the constituents understand a project or a program. But at the end of the day, if I try to sell you something and you don't like what I'm trying to sell, in my world, Alan, you know this because, you know, I sold copiers over the years and you've seen me work. If you don't want to buy what I'm selling, I don't get to force you to buy it. And I think government really should operate somewhat in that fashion.
Thank you, Jim. Nick, where can the County Board of Supervisors save the county money?
I definitely do not think I'm in a position at this point to say where our current board could save the county money. If I did get in a position, I would research, obviously, talk to the citizens, and do what I could to cut any wasteless spending. But I don't see that there is any at this time.
Okay, thank you. I'm off to you, Nick. Do you have a position on the state enabling delinquent court debt to be collected to shore up county collections for revenue? Let me repeat that again.
Yes, one more time, please.
Do you have a position on the state enabling delinquent court debt to be collected to shore up county collections for revenue?
Am I getting that correct? The state would collect court debt?
Yes, that's how this question is proposed, that the state would actually be collecting the delinquent court debt.
And refund it back to the county?
Mhm.
I suppose that would be a great thing for the state to do. It sounds like a great thing for the state to do, collect the money and give it back to the county. So without knowing too much information preliminary, I would be for that.
Jim?
One more time.
Sure. Do you have a position on the state enabling delinquent court debt to be collected to shore up county collections for revenue?
The fact that this question is even being asked tells me that, you know, if they're not just innately and inherently allowing it to be collected, clearly there must be a trapdoor that neither my opponent nor myself are aware of. And so I'm going to use a time-honored answer to that question because that doesn't fall within our purview. You know, great, if we can get the money back, that's great. There's no downside to them giving us money that would be owed to the courts, but clearly because it's not our decision, I didn't spend a lot of time prepping for that particular answer.
Didn't mean anything to me. Jim, do you have a position on need to be able to tax farm buildings over and above the price of the farmland?
I guess the question I would ask whoever, the question for the people or the person that wrote that question, we're talking about a net new tax that doesn't currently exist?
Apparently.
So basically, I'm guessing this is in the Farmstead Act, in the vein of the Farmstead Act, where basically farm property, the dwellings that are on farm property are basically, you know, not taxed like they would be if they were in the city of Gowrie or city of Fort Dodge. And that's a time-honored tradition that dates, you know, way back over the years. You know, I'm kind of a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of person. And obviously where I live, I don't live on farm grounds, so, you know, it wouldn't directly impact me, but it would impact people that I know. So I don't have a strong opinion on this. This is one where I would want to, I guess, have people weigh in, tell me the pros and cons. The pro clearly would be a secondary backdoor way to increase taxes, you know, because I'm sure there are people that feel it's unfair that their property and their dwellings are not taxed, while in the rural market their properties are taxed, where in the rural market they aren't. So I guess I would want to better understand the ramifications. There's a law called the Law of Unintended Consequences, and while the intention of generating revenue and providing equity to all home and building owners might be pure, I guess I'd want to better know how is it going to affect the agricultural market. So that's a need to know more information on that topic.
Thank you. Nick, do you have a position on the need to be able to tax farm buildings over and above the price of the farmland?
Well, Mr. Reed and I are here to vie for the position of District 5, which has a lot of rural areas. So for lack of better words, I think it would be political suicide to say that I would like to tax the farmers more. So no, at this time, I would not like to do that.
Good position, I'd say.
Yep, amen.
Nick, as a county supervisor, what would you propose to reduce the gravel road ditches weed problems? Many of these weeds are as tall as corn, apparently.
I guess on the gravel roads I've been on, I have not noticed that yet. We would have to talk to, I'm on the conservation board. They have a weed management system. So I could take that back to my other board and see if there's not a way we could take care of that problem.
You know, the noxious weed problem is a statewide problem from what I understand. Again, by no means am I going to claim to be a weed or weed and ditch expert. But I've heard enough passing conversations to know that the state probably bears some responsibility on their roadways, and clearly noxious weeds have a dramatic effect in terms of invading farmlands. So, you know, to the degree that we have a problem, if we wait on it, you know, we're behind the 8 ball even further. So it is the county's job to deal with noxious weeds, and frankly, if we have a problem that's accelerating, it would suggest that we're not getting it done. Now, I'm not here to throw anybody under the bus, but I guess what I would say is, you know, the squeaky wheel sometimes gets the grease. If you have a noxious weed problem, bring it to the attention. One thing I will say about our county government, and I truly believe this, you know, I believe this to be true, if you point out a need and you shine a light on it, I got to tell you, I believe that our local officials and representatives and department heads are frankly damn responsive. So you'd like to think that it's going to inherently get taken care of, but sometimes there are multiple competing interests, and so that's what would be my suggestion, is assist your elected officials and department heads, point out where you have the problem. Yes, you'd like to think that they're going to go out and just take care of it for you, but you know, noxious weeds, I've got thistles growing in my ravine, and we've been dealing with it, and it seems to be we have more this year than we have in years past.
Jim, should the legislation revisit the local input control position of regulations to control confinement livestock feeding facilities?
Because, read the question one more time.
Good.
I'm prepared to speak in terms of my opinion and my position on hog confinements, but I want to make sure I understand the intent of the specific question.
Sure. Should the legislature revisit the local input control position of regulations to control confinement livestock feeding facilities?
I tell you what, I'm a city kid at heart, born and raised in Fort Dodge, actually born in Detroit, spent 6 weeks there, came back to Fort Dodge. I was a city kid at heart, but I'd work on my Uncle Chuck and Betty's farm down outside of Dayton each year, helping shell corn, walk beans, cut pigs. I didn't actually cut them, Doc Hubbard did. I just had to hold the 40, 50-pound hogs that my Uncle Chuck let get a little too far along. The bottom line is, if you allow, you know, farming used to be 10 farmers, neighboring farmers with 200 to 400 hogs. Now it's one confinement with upwards of 4,000 to 5,000 as was proposed outside of Clare. The paradigm has shifted. At that same time, there's greater or heightened awareness of the impact that can have on our natural resources. But I think we've got to all keep in mind that there's a lot of emotion. What I would rather see than having local input, I think the master matrix that the DNR uses, because the proposed Granite was a Granite Falls confinement outside of Clare, actually met the minimum standard, when and yet it's so close to impacting a water source, a populated area. Rather than allowing necessarily direct local impact, I think what we ought to do is review that process so we better ensure that we don't put our resources in harm's way. But make no mistake, we are the #1 hog producing state in the nation. I don't want to see us do anything to jeopardize the swine industry. Our economy hinges on it. I've sold copiers to people who generate revenue as a result of hog production. And I think, you know, the problem we have right now is everybody supports agriculture, but oh my God, don't put that next door to my place. So I want to make sure that we're supportive of agriculture and we don't overcorrect. So my answer is no. I mean, we still have the ability to politically weigh in, Bennett, but I think I would leave it at that. You want an empirical standard.
Thank you, Jim. Nick, should the legislature revisit the local input control position of regulations to control confinement livestock feeding facilities?
Okay, this is a big deal in our county right now. So I've been studying this a lot, and I have prepared an answer of how I feel about this. So as a rule, I'm not opposed to hog confinements. We have some responsible owners who are good stewards of our water and land. As supervisors, we need to also implement responsible planning. This particular hog confinement west of Clare is a unique situation to this matrix alone. It is not acceptable because of the shallow water table and the drainage isn't appropriate. People in the county don't have water treatment plants like they do in the cities. The water comes directly from wells, so then we need to be mindful of this. We also have to be mindful of water quantity and quality. As a member of the Webster County Conservation Board, I recognize that runoff from this particular hog confinement could damage wildlife and bring about issues downstream. A chain of events, once put in motion, can't be reversed. To prevent this now could prevent lawsuits later. So I definitely think we need to look at the master matrix in the future.
Thank you, Nick. This gentleman is going to be the last question I'm going to ask you tonight, and it is somewhat confusing to me, but I'm going to read it.
Great.
Nick, should the county be able to set setbacks off of roadways for building farmhouses and buildings? I think we're talking about building codes.
One more time, should counties be able to?
Should the county be able to set setbacks? In other words,
Move, yeah.
building codes is what I think this is what it's trying to say, off of roadways for building farmhouses and buildings. I think they're talking about the distance.
I believe they already do that through planning and zoning. Webster County is a zoned county, so they should be able to look at that and change it if needed.
Jim?
You know, normally when somebody asks a question, should they be able to, it means the person asking the question knows that they can't. I don't know, admittedly, I don't know who establishes a setback or if the question really means can there be variances to, you know, increase or decrease that setback. So, you know, I really can't answer this intelligently without more information.
I'm on board with you guys. So with that, we're going to start down with our closing, and we're going to start off with Nick. Todd, we're going to get 3 minutes to do this. So if you want to hit your timer, and Nick, you want to come into a close?
Todd, you don't need to worry about it. I probably won't take 3, so short and sweet. So once again, I'd like to thank Mr. O'Connor, Iowa Central, the Greater Fort Dodge Growth Alliance for hosting this forum. I'd also like to thank Mr. Reed and all of you who attended. So 3 months prior to entering the process of becoming a supervisor in the primary, I began prepping myself to serve the 5th District of Webster County. Since January, I have attended the supervisor meetings and went through the budget hearings, which has provided me both the knowledge of the process and ability to read the budget. I have, at my own expense, taken the 3-day drainage course through Iowa State Extension. I have met many of the hardworking and retired residents of the city and townships that comprise the 5th District. My future wife, Sarah, and I, who will be married October 29th, I don't know why we planned that, but right before the election, we have chosen to stay in Webster County when most of our classmates have moved away. We will raise our family here, and I hope to be a part of the reason our children choose to stay here too. As a firefighter paramedic, I have the privilege of aiding people during a crisis. As a supervisor, I hope to help people through preventative measures. It is my honor to offer myself as a candidate for 5th District Webster County Supervisor. I ask those of you from the district for your vote on November 8th or by your mail-in ballot. Again, thanks to you all.
Thank you, Jim.
You know, I want to, again, thank you, Nick, for taking part tonight. This ain't easy, getting up in front of a crowd. I've done it a lot and done a lot of public speaking, but out of context, it feels totally different. I want to thank my mom and dad for, again, you know, I look here, I am running for supervisor. Win or lose, you know, I can tell you I'm self-assured enough. This is, you know, if I lose, it isn't going to define who I am, and likewise, if I win, it won't do so either. But I want to thank my mom and dad, Dr. James and Ruth Reed, for giving me the opportunities I've had that put me in a position to have the experience to feel self-assured and confident enough in both my decision-making, my ability to carry myself, and hopefully my ability to represent you, the constituents of District 5 in Webster County. I'd also like to thank Pam Passo, my significant other, with all the things that I'm involved in. And again, I offered them up earlier as a example of leadership, commitment to this area. But I got to tell you, if you've got a significant other that wants to go to a concert every other night and is, you know, always out at Harlan Rogers looking where he's going to help drain underneath a stage or where he's going to put porta potties. It takes a certain degree of patience. So Pam Passo, thank you for that continued patience over the years. I said earlier that I'm addicted to working to try to make a difference, and I love Fort Dodge, Webster County, and the region. You know, I look at all the things that I go to over, you know, events, whether it be the Dayton Rodeo, whether it be the 4th of July celebration in Gowrie and you know, Twin Lakes, while it's not in Webster County. I mean, the fabric of who we are is represented in all those lifetimes of experience. So I'm sincere when I tell you I want to make a difference in that regard. But more importantly, I want to use the experience that I had growing a successful business from 4th to 5th in market share locally to #1. I want to use the experience of starting a 501c4 nonprofit and basically being able to scour a balance sheet and income statement on your behalf. I want to do it in a fiscally conservative manner. I want to. The thing that I think I'm going to leave everybody, both that's listening, watching after the fact, and in the audience tonight, in my 27-year career as a sales representative selling copier printers and technology, the one skill that I think has served me the best is being a good listener and being a very acute listener. I'm not talking about just hearing, I'm talking about actually listening. And I think that's probably the most important charge, and the supervisors we have, I think, do a damn good job of it, but I will be that good listener that listens to you. I'm not going to necessarily knee-jerk react and just, you know, act on a whim because somebody talks to me, but I'm sincerely going to listen. Most importantly, as a guy who's single, no dependent children, I'm going to put the requisite time in. And I want to thank all of you in the audience tonight very quickly with my time running out. You know, you folks have invested your time to come here tonight, and frankly, we need more of it. So thank you to those here, and thank you to the folks listening at home.
And now I'd like to thank Nick Carlson and Jim Reed for putting your name on the ballot for Webster County District 5. And I also, at this time, want to thank Clark Fletcher for the time that he has spent on the County Board of Supervisors. On behalf of the Greater Fort Dodge Growth Alliance, I want to thank all of you for coming out this evening, and all of you who tuned in on KVFD to listen to this public forum. I hope that you were somewhat informed, and remember to get out there in November and vote. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.